went home, and no sooner did I open the door than I was attacked by a mass of muscle and fur. "Beamer, get off!" I peeled the big brown striped Tom off my shoulder and dumped him on the couch. As a kitten, Beamer jumping from the staircase railing onto me was impressive and cute as hell. Now that he was in the 15-pound class, it was less amusing. To me, anyway, Beamer still thought it was a riot. But even he couldn't cheer me up tonight. As I heated the shepherd's pie I got over at Henry's Market, I listened to the police scanner but didn't hear anything that would help. As Beamer washed himself on the leather couch next to me, I drank too much and flipped around the TV. A beaut. 40-inch plasma with controls to put the USS Enterprise to shame. But there's nothing to keep my attention. Ditto the internet and a new issue of Maxim. If you want proof that my kind are born, not made, just do the math. If we could turn normals, not a single lingerie model would be left unbitten. Trust me. Frustrated in every sense of the world, I didn't drift off until just before the alarm rang. Groaning, I got up, dumped kibble into Beamer's bowl, and hit the bricks, not because I had a lead, but because I had a headache worse than any hangover. The memory of evil left unchecked is one of the downsides of the job, and I didn't even want to think about what Smith meant. I walked by Ziggy's, but Andy wasn't working. The day outside matched my insides. Granite gray, cold, depressing. Even the telephone poles were decorated to suit my mood. The neighborhood was papered with missing pet flyers. I knew how I'd feel if Beamer ever went missing. It'd be a crappy Christmas for the kids worrying about kitty cakes or Bongo or Maxie. Focus on the job, Jerry. Keep it together. Down by the Willows, I caught a faint scent. The Salem Willows is an amusement park, very small and dated. It's mostly whack-a-mole and fried dough stands and rackety rides during the summer. In the winter, it's a wasteland, boarded up and abandoned. It wasn't abandoned now. Salem PD, State Police, and the ME vans were there. My vision and hearing sharpened, and my olfactory nerves went crazy. Smith had been there, not long ago. Weems was also there. This time, he came right over to me. "Steuben, been seeing a lot of you lately." He only reaches my chin, and he's kind of pudgy, so short man syndrome never helped things between us. That's why werewolves and vamps have such crappy reputations. The local authorities always notice us sniffing around crime scenes and figure we're the bad guys. I sipped my coffee. "Been seeing a lot of you too, Weems. Funny, huh?" I ain't laughing. He crossed his arms. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for the guy at the hospital who knocked my sister around." His face softened just a little bit. "Your sister, she's okay," suggesting I was not. "Come on, Weems. I'm trying to catch an asshole here." "And what are we doing?" For an instant I thought he'd either hit me or have a heart attack. He balled up his fists and turned a shade of red that would have made Santa's tailors envious. "You know what I mean." I tried to look desperate, no stretch, under the circumstances. "Come on, man. It's Claudia." The stories would have you believe that vampires are incredibly alluring. It's true, they produce a pheromone that seems to make people around them comfortable, which helps vamps in their healing work. Add a good dose of empathy, and yes, vampires hold a definite attraction for normals who think of it as sexual. Something about Claudia had hit Weems hard, right between the eyes. She'd hate me throwing her under the bus like that, but if it got me past his defensiveness... I could see that Weems was torn, but he wasn't going to pass up anything that would make him look good in front of Claudia. "We got one Vic, and it's a wet one. Or it was a couple of days ago. It's pretty dried up now." Weems looked greenish. He never could stand the sight of blood. Chest sliced open and the heart removed. "Jesus," I swallowed. "Got an ID?" "Homeless guy, my guess. He was either flopping in the shed over there or he was lured in." "You said sliced open? You're a ghoul, Steuben." He sighed. "Emmy says a big knife. Looks like. They need more tests." I nodded. If there was one thing we could agree on, it was the reluctance of M.E. to spill the details. He hesitated. The chest was opened up like... oh, jeez. It reminded me of one of those advent calendars. The skin pulled back square and the ribs broken to get the heart out. Maybe he didn't like me seeing him queasy. Maybe he just regretted telling me as much as he did, but Weems' face hardened. "Get lost, Steuben. I find you nosing around. You'll be sorry." "Merry Christmas to you, Weems." I left. "They found a body," I said after I let myself into Claudia's condo. Claudia was excited. "Yeah, I know. I just heard it on the news." It was her day off, and while Claude was waiting to hear something solid back from the family, who were going crazy over her news, she was trying to work out a profile for Smith. Maybe she was doing rote work for the same reason I was, to keep from thinking about our world being turned inside out. I still felt like I had the pins knocked out from under me, and I hated that uncertainty. "Down the Willows?" I said, surprised. "That was quick." "No, pulled from the harbor." She frowned. The woman had been there about a week. They said mutilated, which usually means something worse. So was mine. I told her what I'd just learned from Weems. They knew who she was? A local prostitute was all they said. There's a chance it's not the same guy, not our guy, I said. I'm not willing to bet on that. Me neither. He selected people on the periphery of society, she said, going for those who live under the radar. I considered where the trail had led me, the abandoned drug den, the dry spell in the emergency room, and, oh hell, 3 missing cats in one neighborhood was just too much coincidence. I told Claudia, I guess he's been doing this a while. She nodded, and he's escalating. He's refining his ritual, getting bolder, going for the less vulnerable, more public targets. It's typical that he started with animals. The look on her face didn't bode well for Smith when we caught him. Jerry, it's only going to get worse from here. I'm guessing he's attributing some special significance to the date, the full moon, Christmas. Suddenly I knew. It is Christmas. I said. I told her about Weems' description of the corpse, what he'd said about advent calendars. Doesn't that sound like what you're talking about? Little, treats leading up to the big day? She nodded. Right, Christmas. Good eyes on Weems. I snorted. He's my hero. But Christmas is just 2 days away. My question is, why did Smith have to call a cab? He didn't have a car, she said promptly. Weems brought him in, right? I made a face at her. But if Smith is responsible for the murders, he must have a car. He can't afford to let it go out in public. Too many people could see what? Bloodstains, cracked window? Too recognizable, she said. A truck with a Bisno logo on it, maybe. Contractors, deliveries. Right, it's got to be the sort of thing that blends in, but not the thing you drive for private stuff. I thought for a minute when an idea hit me. Like a police car. Maybe it isn't Smith. Maybe it's Weems. Jerry, get real. Weems is your bête noire and he's a dickhead, but he's not our guy. He was at the hospital. I ticked off the reasons on my fingers, loving that Smith might just be a garden variety psycho, his trail confused by Weems. Weems was at the donut shop. He's been dogging my tracks all day, and every time I saw him, I felt the call to change. All the places you'd expect to see a cop investigating the same case as we are. Have you ever wanted to change because of Weems before now? She put her hand on mine. It was warm as toast. I know you don't like him, but you're getting distracted by this. You've always been so damn sure about everything. That was the problem. I couldn't be sure about anything anymore if Smith was Fangborn. I pulled away. I don't think so. I think you were picking up on his vibes. Same time you were dealing with some ordinary run-of-the-mill loony, and that's why you thought it was Smith. You're wrong, she said. Weems has nothing to do with this. I think you want it to be Weems so you don't have to consider that there might be evil out there where we haven't seen it before. I get it, Jer. You want things to be cut and dried, but now we know it can't be like that. Whatever. I turned away. Don't dismiss me, Jerry. You know the traditional conflict between werewolves and vampires? It's really just a sibling thing. Claudia, just because... Shh! She was pointing to the TV. The news was on. A school bus, its driver, and 6 kids were missing from their daycare center. Okay, I said. We've got the fake address down at the point, a murder at the Willows, a body in the harbor. Throw in the missing pets and we have someone with the familiarity of the waterfront. That's a couple big neighborhoods to cover. He needs space, and he needs a place where people won't hear him. Claudia was looking at the map spread out in front of us. He's sticking with what's familiar to him, which is good for us, but he's also an organized psychopath, which is bad. The houses are just too close together, here and here, I said, pointing out 2 neighborhoods. That leaves the warehouses in the industrial park down the point, and the coal plant over here. I pointed to a neighborhood that was near, by water, but on the other side of town, by land. A school bus is going to stick out in either place, Claudia said. Is he going to take them out to sea? If he is, we're pretty well screwed, I said. Protective coloring. Where can you take 6 crying kids in a school bus where no one will notice? We looked at each other, then simultaneously at one of the neighborhoods we just rejected. A short distance from my own house, separated by large parking lots and a playing field, was the middle school, now empty for the holidays. It's not that we need the moon to shift, though that helps. It's easier to run around as a wolf when there aren't many people around. It's easier to pick up a faint trail when the dust has settled from the day. It's not that we need the moon, but somehow it makes it easier for me, the same way the sun takes the poison out of vamps like Claudia. You'd have to talk to our scientists who are working out exactly how we Fangborn work, but if you think of it like being a vulture's bare head helping to kill the bacteria they pick up, or photosynthesis, taking nutrients from the sunlight, that's probably close. All I know is that Claudia couldn't taste the blood and clean it, cauterize the wound, and numb the memory without sunlight to charge her up. And in the same way, don't ask me how, I'm not one of the geeks, I get recharged by the moon. Plus, less bad guys also wait for night to work. Makes it easier for us all. The moon was full and low on the horizon as we parked down the street from the school. We ran down the plan again. Check the school and call the cops if we find anything. Simple, if we were right. If we weren't already too late. Got the gear? I asked Claudia. She nodded, held up the leash, her excuse for being out with a very large dog, and a charged cell phone. As for me, while I hate what people inflict on their pets, birthday parties, pedicures, Halloween costumes, I will always be grateful for the dog clothing craze. And grateful to the guy who invented stretched fabrics. My Lycra doggy tracksuit makes it a heck of a lot easier if I have to change back to human and don't want to be butt naked. Claudia doubled the knots in her bootlaces, tied her hair back, and we went into the schoolyard. The bus was there all right, on the side, cold and silent as an empty grave. Sure, school was out and it was night, but who notices a school bus outside of school? The schoolyard had been badly plowed, so there were no clear tracks, but it only took me a minute to find the basement door they'd used, the lock broken. The reek hit me as soon as we got the door open. This time I didn't resist the change. The rush of adrenaline and endorphins and other hormones blocked out whatever pain shrieking bones forced through evolutionary growth in an instant might bring. Nature wouldn't be so cruel as to put this burden on us without compensation. The bloodlust didn't hurt either. It was only Claude's warning hand on my back that reminded me not to howl with the delight of it. Smith's spoor was worse than any I'd ever smelled, overwhelming the traces of new linoleum, old wax, and textbooks. It was nearly unbearable to my lupine nose, but one thought of bloodthirsty, simple joy, cleared of all human doubt and fear, overwhelmed even that. It was time to track and to tear. I stepped out of my boots and glanced up at Claude, who was down on one knee. The reek was hitting her just as badly. It was always harder for her. Vamps don't have the same chemical buffer that protects wolves. Her skin took on a violet cast visible even in the shadows, and her eyes were wide and bright. Her facial features broadened, her nose receded, and her fingers lengthened. She stood up, shook herself, and nodded. As she packed my boots into her backpack, I saw the gleam of her viperish fangs extending, the glint of a streetlight on the fine pattern of snake scale and armor of thick, supple skin. Snakes have always been associated with healing and transformation. There's a reason they're on the staff of Asclepius, but they've got a rep for danger, too. I whined and stared at her neck. Her hand went up and she found the pearls she'd forgotten to take off. "Thanks," she said with a slight hiss. Still largely humanoid, fangs and a forked tongue make speech awkward, but not impossible. She stowed the necklace in her bag and nodded. I led the way, stealthy as a shadow. I cast around, stopped, panted, and tried again, but with no luck. There was no one single track to pick up. Smith had been here long enough for the basement to be so saturated with his stench that I could barely breathe. I couldn't detect the children. I hoped we weren't too late. Claudia nodded. She pointed at the first door and we both listened. Nothing. She tried it. Locked solid. The next was an unlocked closet. The stink was there, too, but less. The bus driver was stashed there. There was a faint pulse that was fading. Claudia fanged down and called 911. We continued. The next door opened silently. I could smell WD-40 recently applied to the hinges. No way to tell Claude, but she pointed to the duct tape across the lock, and I nodded. We went in. The children were there. Even under Smith's foulness, I could tell they were alive. I felt a surge of delight. They were drugged, only half awake. A light on the playground offered just enough illumination for a normal to see forms without detail. My nose told me of full diapers, fear, and baby shampoo. Smith was nowhere around. We went quietly just in case. "Hang on," Claudia said. She changed back about halfway, just enough to keep her powers on deck, but not so far that the first thing the kids saw was a pale purple lady with no nose and very big teeth. She went over to them quickly. "Hey, you guys, let's get you fixed up and we'll get you home, okay? My dog Chewy is going to do some tricks for you. He's really big, but he's really, really friendly. Chewy, come!" That was my cue. I knew to play it dumb and sweet over in the faint light so the kids would focus on me. That way they'd be less afraid and they wouldn't notice Claudia practicing her leechcraft. I spend my time fighting evil, not practicing party tricks. So whenever I fell over, the kids laughed, so it was okay. As soon as Claudia got one kid untied, her razor nails dancing scalpels along the duct tape. I was there, his new best friend, and they were so busy patting me they forgot to be afraid. Under the guise of inspecting their wounded hands, she got to work, biting their wrists, narcotizing the pain, neutralizing their terror, sucking out Smith's drugs, and dimming the children's memories. I could sense her body reacting to the blood and emotion she was taking in, her muscles rippling, nearly all trace of humanity lost from her features, even as she healed the little ones. She'd just finished the last one when he was on her. Even as I picked up on the fresh scent, snow mixed with spoiled milk and rotting fish heads, Smith rocketed from the shadows, moving faster than anything human. If I knew he was there, it meant Claudia knew, too. She shoved the kid toward me as Smith landed on her. She rolled with him as far away from us as she could. In spite of Claudia's ministrations, the kids whimpered. I grabbed the last one by the hood of her jacket and gently pulled her the rest of the way to the group. I stood between them and the brawl, nudging the kids to stand behind me, thankful Disney had removed their fear of large, wild animals. It took everything I had to keep from jumping in and ripping Smith apart, but I had to keep the children safe. And there's not much that can stop my sister when she's pissed and changed. For all her tweedy skirts and bookishness, she's as much a warrior as I am. Smith was putting up a pretty good fight, and the son of a bitch knew how to use a knife. Claudia would need a week on the roof to recover from this. I was glad of the dark. The children's eyes weren't as sharp as mine. They couldn't see the amount of blood that Claudia was letting. She was winning. Maybe Smith wasn't Fangborn, maybe just some kind of freak genetic human anomaly. Suddenly, you could practically feel the energy she expended fill the room, almost blotting out the horror of Smith. Righteous violence in the cause of justice. I let out a low growl. There was too much energy. The air was sizzling, as if every Fangborn in New England was changing next to me. Claudia screamed. Smith had changed. An unholy transformation, something never before seen in the world as I knew it, evil taking on the shape of a werewolf. If I'd had time for rational human thought, I would have been slowed by what shouldn't have been happening, by what was impossible, but the pull to attack was so strong I almost burst out of my skin. I bunched up and launched myself at Smith. Claudia threw herself out of the way as I bowled the other wolf out of the room. We skidded into the hallway, unable to get a purchase on the cold, polished cement floor. With a scrabble of claws, I was up, but he was just a second faster and knocked me down again, snapping at my eyes. I slashed at his gut and jerked my head out of the way, feeling his hot breath and drool on my ears. I whipped around and grabbed at his muscle. I was bigger than he was, and he almost pulled away before I closed my teeth. I caught him, barely, by the tender tip of his nose and the soft skin under his jaw. Teeth slid through flesh, and I held on. He tried to push me away with his front paws, but it was more effective with his rear claws raking across my belly. I smelled my own blood, but held on for dear life. He couldn't pull out of my grasp without tearing himself, and I couldn't let him go. The door opened and cold air washed over us. I heard a shout and recognized Weems. He shouted again. I could smell Weems's fear. Weems drew his pistol. He was going to shoot. Well, I couldn't let him shoot me. I let go, and Smith hurled himself at the doorway and at Weems. Thoughts flashed through my head. If Smith landed on Weems, I could grab him before he did much damage. If he knocked Weems out of the way or took a bullet or six, so much the better for me. Damn. He bolted right past Weems. He couldn't afford to get caught as a werewolf any more than I could. The prospect of decades of lab experiences made life at Cedar Junction look like a week at Sandals. Sweat-soaked polyester, terror, boiled coffee, and roast beef. Weems had had dinner at Big Freddy's. If I'd planted a dirty doggy paw on his face as I chased after Smith, I'm sure it was an accident. Smith was nowhere to be seen as I raced down the street away from the school, but it didn't matter. He was leaving a trail of blood that any Cub Scout could have followed, and the scent was so strong there might as well have been a spotlight on him. I cut through snowy backyards and vaulted a chain-link fence. Christmas lights lit the snow, and the smell of cooking meats and seafood wasn't even a momentary distraction. Another burst of speed brought me down to the historic district on the waterfront, the 18th century houses decorated with candles and garlands. The tear in my belly was bad. I could feel the shock of cold air through fur even as my muscle reknit itself. There was a sharp pain whenever I moved my left leg. The icy snow, dirty with sand and rock salt, packed itself in between the pads of my paws, slowing me down and throwing my gait. Blood, mine and Smith's, was matted in my fur and my jaw ached. The trail of blood was getting heavier, though. Smith was also slowing down. In spite of my wounds, I sped up, eager to end this. But part of me hoped Smith would never stop. If he stopped, I'd kill him and my job would be finished. Then I'd have to think about what was happening. I wasn't sure if my frail human brain could deal with it. I leapt into a back porch, tense, then sailed over the back of the deck onto the sidewalk of Derby Street. I skidded on the icy bricks of the crosswalk and barely missed getting hit by an Escalade. I yelped, feeling the breeze as the UV swerved past. The waterfront opened up in front of me. The heavy clouds parted for an instant, and the full moon shone down on the blood that led straight down Derby Wharf, which stretched out a quarter-mile into the harbor. Unless Smith wanted to swim in life-sucking cold water toward the winking heads of Marblehead, he had nowhere to go except back to me. I grinned, as only a wolf drunk on power can. There was no one out, and I was glad. It was usually a place for evening strolls, the marks of lesser canines blazoned against the snowbanks. I padded down the wide gravel path, catching my breath, preparing myself for the last fight. Smith was smarter than I gave him credit for. He timed his attack for the instant the lighthouse lamps whirled toward me, washing together the shadows and reducing my field of vision. Keeping my eyes lowered and narrowed, my ears back, I made myself wait till the last moment. Then I sprang at him just as hard as I could. I caught Smith with his head up and seized him by the throat, biting down with every bit of strength I had. His momentum carried him over me, and as he fell, his own weight tore his flesh off in my mouth. Hot blood poured, and he dropped down dead at my feet. He might have been a predator with a hero's weapons, but I was a hero with true purpose. I spat out the fur and gore as the moonlight flooded the wharf and harbor. Steam rose from the wounds of the dead wolf, black blood on the snow. Power from the kill, having slain one of my own kind, almost knocked me off my feet. It was possible I was the first one ever in history to have experienced it. Evil just doesn't exist in the Fangborn. At least it hadn't before now. I threw back my head and howled, my inhuman blood singing, the completeness and rightness of my triumph dizzying. But somewhere in the back of my brain, the part that stays human, I knew it was the last time I'd feel that way. On Christmas Eve, Claudia found me down in the basement of my house. It's finished with mats on the floor as well, so we can train in private. "That's some sweat you're working up there," she yelled. She was wearing a t-shirt with the bullseye printed on the heart. One says, "Go ahead and try it, Buffy." I was flaked out on the floor in 3 layers of sweats, my headphones on, the music turned to 11. I considered a statement, then showed her a finger. She came in with the stereo, cranked it up to 14 or 20, so I had to pull the headphones off, then switched off the CD. She glanced at the player. "Disintegration. Nice. And have you been down here since yesterday morning moping out to the cure? I'm going to take my old CDs away if you're going to behave like an adolescent." I am an adolescent. And I am, by my people's standards, just a pup. I get that. "Jerry, you peed on Weems's car." I shrugged. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. After I'd returned, still wolf-self, to the school, Claudia had sold most of her story to a suspicious Weems. She was out walking her dog when she saw the school bus. Not wanting to feel like a fool if it wasn't the missing children, she explored and found the kids. The kids, still under her chemical thrall, had confirmed it. The scary man's dog had attacked the nice lady's doggie, who chased both the bad guys away. Weems later found Smith's body at the wharf, dead, without a mark on him, save for a stitched-up arm. She knelt beside me. "Jerry, Smith is a shock. I'd buy that. I was rattled too. It's scary as hell." The family computer lists have been lighting up with the discussion, and none of the historians have ever come up with anything like this, ever. "I'm not scared, Claude," I said, "and I get this is major, it's just that..." I took a breath. It was even harder to say out loud than it was to admit to myself. I liked knowing we Fangborn were the righteous ones, and that whatever we hunted was always wrong. No doubts, never. I always thought of it as the payoff for the work we do. It also meant, no matter what my opinion, that Weems was at least nominally on our side. She cocked her head. "You mean, in addition to the super strength, the healing, the longevity?" "Yeah. And the rush that comes after the change?" "Well, yeah." She frowned. "You're young, and you're being greedy, and you're forgetting the first lesson." I scowled. "The work is the reward." You sound like Grandpa. "There's a good reason for that. He was right." She hunkered down against the wall next to me. "Look, everyone reaches a crisis of faith at some point in their life. For me, it was trying to figure out if we had the right to live outside human law, learning the difference between law and justice. It's part of the life. It makes us understand what it is to be human, why that's precious and to be protected. Normals never get half of what we have and go through their lives in doubt. We're not human, Claude. Never will be. And now we get the doubt, too." She shook her head. "We're closer to them than anything else, biologically and spiritually. We need that connection. And you know that killing Smith was right, even if he was one of us. But no Fangborn had ever killed Fangborn before. No Fangborn had ever manifested pure evil before." I couldn't turn off the voice in my head. Claudia talked for a long time about the community of the Fangborn, duty, honor, and all that crap. I listened. A lot of it made sense. I nodded. You're right. I need time, that's all. Thanks. No problem. I'm just glad I got here before you got into the 9-inch nails. Relief flooded her features, which told me exactly how rocky she thought I looked. So, you packed? No, won't take me long. This year our Christmas present to each other were tickets to Aruba. Expensive, but we both needed the sunshine right now. She nodded, then eyed me sternly. But you're gonna go to midnight mass, right? Probably. I gotta go for a walk first. Clear my head. I hauled myself up, muscles stiff not from the fight, but from lying around. Any harm I take will still heals rapidly as long as I remain wolfy, but any hurt I get while in human form reappears when I revert back to human form. Good, I'll see you there. And Jerry? Yeah, Claude. She wrinkled her nose. Take a shower, would you? I flipped her the bird again and got into my jacket. She smiled as she left, and I knew I had her convinced. That's the good thing about having a shrink for a sister. You learn what they look for, and you can give it to them. Yes, her words made sense. They just did nothing to take away my pain. I pulled on my duck boots, hat, scarf, gloves. Probably didn't need so much. It was over 30 degrees, but ever since the fight, I just couldn't get warm. I walked for a long time and found myself at the foot of Derby Wharf. I went up far enough to let the holiday lights of the street fall behind me until I was alone in the frigid dark. Bloodstains blurred the snow, which had been trampled by the locals looking for the serial killer's savage dog. A fierce hellhound roaming Salem, one more myth in the making. I watched the lighthouse beams skim the surface of the dark water, listened to the soft slap of waves against the stone wharf. Anyone with a lick of insight could feel the remnants of power that had been expended here. In our family's annals, there was nothing like this, but now I had to wonder, what else had we missed? Or if this was a really new development, what did it mean? The only thing I knew was that my certainty about my place in the world, my armor and my sword, was shattered. I felt the silence all around me, city noises muffled by the snow, and I tried to find the bottom of the sea of pain I felt. The uncertainty was crushing, the loss of faith like the loss of a limb. I felt broken and made a fool of, mocked by the universe for my belief. I took a deep breath, the kind you take at a crossroads when the dark man shows up and offers you the world in exchange for your grubby soul. As I watched the obsidian water, I took another breath and realized that if I couldn't manage the leap of faith that Claudia described, then I had to make a leap of another kind. Down the street from Derby Wharf is a little bar called In a Pig's Eye. It's a local joint, there's no television, and they pull the best pints in town. Annie works there nights. It's about half full, the folks who are getting one more drink in before Mass, and the ones whose family were the other strangers on bar stools. Geez, Jerry, you been sick or something? You look kind of peaky. She set down a coaster in front of me. Winter warmer? Thanks, Annie, just out of it, I guess. I suddenly remembered my rank-smelling sweats and 2 days' growth of beard, and kept my jacket zipped up. Oh, hell. I bet. I read about Claudia in the paper. You must have freaked. One of the things I've learned to live with is the fact I'll never get credit for being on the scene, for doing the job. I worry about her, but she's good at taking care of herself. Then, I couldn't resist, sweats or no. Besides, Chewie wouldn't let anything happen to her. She put the dark beer down in front of me, a perfect half-inch of froth at the top. No, he's a sweetie. I felt myself flush, remembering the perfume of Annie's ankles, her hand on the back of my neck as she talked to Claudia one summer night. We'd just been coming home from work, and I was still intoxicated by the kill when we ran into Annie. It's one of my fondest memories. You like dogs? She shrugged. Depends. Like people, really. Gotta take them one at a time, you know? Ask her out, I told myself. Ask her out right now. Coffee, drink, anything I help you. How do you feel about Aruba? I felt myself go red again, and it was not what I meant to say. It was too much, too soon, too pimp. Oh, shit. Annie stopped wiping down the bar. Suddenly, the bottomless water seemed a better choice. I'd prefer to start with a drink, maybe dinner, she says slowly. That is, if you're finally actually really getting the guts to ask me out. Yeah? So, that okay? Yeah, but it took you long enough. She glanced at me. You tough guys, you're all just pussycats. You're not always just a big pussycat, are you, Jerry? Mostly I'm a big wolf, I thought giddily. Never again, I vowed. How's tomorrow night? Can't. She looked at me funny. It's Christmas tomorrow, remember? I'm going snowshoeing at Bradley Palmer State Park in the morning. I wrinkled my brow. An odd tradition, but nice, I suppose. She blurred her cheeks. You know I'm Wiccan, right? I like Christmas, but I observe the solstice. She looked a little defensive, but I could barely contain myself. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Trust me when I say that mixed relationships are not a problem for me. She relaxed, then gave me a look that warmed me instantly straight through. If you invite me over for breakfast, I'll ditch the snowshoeing. But I have to leave by noon, because I promised Kelly I'd take her shift at the shelter so she can be with her family. Breakfast at 9 o'clock. I could barely get the words out fast enough. Claudia won't mind? Nah, I'll call her when I get home. Claudia had been pushing me to ask Annie out for the first time I'd mentioned her. She's good people. Not an evil bone in her body, Claudia had said. And Claudia knew bones. Good and evil. I'll be there. Annie smiled so sexy I felt my knees go to jelly. I made a batch of my famous chocolate chip muffins. I'll bring them. Into nature, civic-minded, and a cook. I realized I was grinning like an idiot, so I drank the rest of my beer to keep from proposing to her right then and there. My head ringing with every Christmas carol ever written. Ah, that's a happy ending for Jerry. But the one reason I love to give a character faith is so I could take it right back away from him again. And that's what I proceed to do with the next Fangborn novels, in which Claudia and Jerry show up. So, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want to hear a little bit more about the origins of the Fangborn, why don't you check out the video that I made while I was in discussion with Charlene Harris and Tony Kellner, also on this YouTube channel, where we talk about how I started writing urban fantasy. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hi, this is Dana Cameron. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and to click on the bell icon so you get notifications. If you'd like to support me as a writer and creator, there are links to my books with information about them below. You can order them from your favorite bookstore or your favorite ebook retailer. Thanks again.